Hello, everyone. I've noticed a recent phenomenon in the video game industry that has started to annoy me. In the last couple of months, developers have become more egregious with the type of remasters that they are releasing. The two games that come to mind are Tales of Symphonia and The Legend of Dragoon. Both of these games are old, but the developers that were responsible for remastering them released them in a poor state. The the remasters are essentially botched, and the games are unplayable at launch. I find this inexcusable. The thing is, developers have more than enough resources to port a game from the PS1 or the PS2 to the PS5. There's no reason why these games should be crashing, but the developers still manage to do this. I've never liked the idea of remasters. I've always found that they're a predatory way for developers to make a quick buck. See, the thing is, developers rely on nostalgia with these remasters. They weaponize it in a way that are willing to pay full retail value for a game that they already bought in the past, even though no major changes were done that warrants such a high price. You know, I think, I can grant you that one of the benefits of remasters is that they make a game more accessible to the general public. Like, if you didn't have a GameCube back in the day, now you can play Tales of Symphonia on the PS5 and the PS4. I appreciate when developers do that. And I fully support games like Tales of Symphonia and Legend of Dragoon being remastered because I think that both of these games deserve a remaster. But I find it disappointing that such a low that developers release such a low effort remaster. I feel like both of these games deserve more praise and attention because they're both masterpieces in my mind. But releasing such a bad port will scare away some people from actually trying out the game. But some games, I know some companies recently are abusing the whole practice of remasters. Like, companies that come to mind are EA and regrettably, I'll say Sony. EA recently remastered Dead Space. I think they also remastered Bulletstorm in the PS4. I find it ridiculous that they remastered Dead Space because Dead Space was a game that sold very well. You can easily find this game for under $10. But when it came out on the PS4 and the PS5, they're charging full price for the remaster. It's like, why am I going to pay full price for a game that only includes the DLC and a couple of graphical updates? Bulletstorm, okay, you can make an argument that the game was overshadowed by other first-person shooters during the PS3 era, but I still don't think it's worthy of a remaster. In my estimation, there are two type of criteria that a game should fill when a company is thinking of making a remaster. First off, if the game is rare, I think that a remaster is warranted. No, I think many people be willing to play the RPGs that Atlas released in the PS1 and the PS2. Most of these games nowadays are unobtainable for the average person because they cost in excess of $100 or more. These games did not have a large print run back in the day, and I think a lot of people would be willing to try out some of these obscure RPGs now because Persona has become a mainstream series in the last couple of years. I think also another criteria that makes a game worthwhile to be remastered is whether or not the game has been released in North America before. I think there are a lot of Japanese exclusive games that have never made their way to North America and that should be remastered. I cannot think of, like, off the top of my head, I cannot think of any, but there are a long list of JRPGs that have been released in Japan and had never been released in North America. Like, an example that comes to mind, and the game I'm currently playing, is Shining Resonance Refrain. I know that many games in the Shining series have only been released in Japan, and people have to import the game to experience all the games in the series. So I think people would appreciate if Sega decided to remaster some of those games for a North American audience. But in general, most games that are remastered do not fit these criteria. Like, EA is literally going through their catalog and remastering all the games they released on the PS3. They did a remaster of Need for Speed Burnout. I mean, that game sold well. There's no excuse for that remaster. I understand people are moved by nostalgia and the old games suffer from the fact that the servers are dead and no one plays on them anymore, but what's the point of remastering a Need for Speed game? Like, Need for Speed games are a dime a dozen. There's so many of them that are released. The series is watered down, just like how Activision finds a way to release a Call of Duty game every single year, and then you ask yourself, what's so great about the new Need for Speed game that's coming out? I understand that people have nostalgia for the older PS3 titles, but I don't think it's warranted to release a remaster for those games. I mean, I think, and as I previously mentioned, I think Sony is another company that has recently been abusing remasters. I noticed that they have decided to remaster The Last of Us again. I mean, this annoys me so much because The Last of Us was remastered for the PS4, and it was remastered for the PS4 early in its life cycle. So if you wanted to play The Last of Us, you had a chance to do so early on. I mean, The Last of Us is now on PS3, PS4, PS5, and the thing that I find egregious about this whole thing is that Sony is charging, if I recall, full retail value for the remaster. And it's like, what are you adding to the game that's so great? Like, why am I paying full price again for a game that already came out on PS4 and PS3? Like, I don't get it. I mean, a lot of people on Xbox, obviously, like people who only played on Xbox or Nintendo and missed out on The Last of Us last two generations. I understand that for them, they don't mind paying full retail value for a game if they haven't played it before. But as someone who's had the PS3 and the PS4, I don't understand why The Last of Us is getting a remaster. Just like Dead Space, it was the greatest hits title for the PS3 and the PS4. You can easily have gotten it for $20 or lower for years on end, and now they've decided to remaster it. You know, as I've been talking about The Last of Us, another company that comes to mind that always finds a way to remaster old games is Rockstar. You think of Grand Theft Auto 5. How many times are they going to remaster this game? I understand Grand Theft Auto 5 is a cash cow for Rockstar because GTA Online has a lot of microtransactions that people constantly buy. But when the GTA 5 remaster was announced for the PS5, the reception was generally negative. People are getting tired of Rockstar remastering the same game over and over because people have been looking forward to GTA 6 for a while now. And how long can you keep on beating a dead horse? Grand Theft Auto 5 is not as relevant as it used to be in 2014 and during the PS4 era. And people have grown tired and weary of it. It just shows the general disconnect between video game companies and the public. Like, they are quick to remaster games that no one asked for. Like, I remember there were some on PS4. There were some racing games that were remastered. Like, I think it was like an ATX versus MT, like some ATX game that was remastered for the PS4. I can't remember its name, but it's like, who's lining up to buy that remaster? Like, if you go online, there's a lot more games that people would be willing to buy a remaster of. Like, it wouldn't, like a racing game wouldn't be in my top 10 games I'd like to see remastered. And yeah, obviously another company that keeps on remastering games that no one wants is Call of Duty. I mean, Activision with Call of Duty. I mean, people who play the series have a lot of nostalgia, but I feel like in the case of Activision and Call of Duty, nostalgia is kind of weaponized. Like, people are deluded in their views about the past Call of Duty games. Like, you think about the Call of Duty games on the PS3 and they were glitched so much. Like, many Call of Duty fans will say Modern Warfare 2 is the best game in the series, but then you think back to the problems that the game experienced in development. Like, the publisher of the series filed a lawsuit against Activision, and they stopped updating the game, so it was filled with hackers from the get-go and perks that people used that were unfair and made the online game mode unenjoyable for the most part. I mean, Activision is just going through their lineup and remastering all their Call of Duty games, and people are like, they're selling like hotcakes. Like, I don't get it. But ultimately, if someone buys a remaster and they've owned the game before, like, I don't hold it against them. Like, it's their, it's their decision. It's their prerogative to buy the same game over. Like, to me, like, I understand game companies kind of need to release remasters because it's a way for them to make profit, and it's a way for them to get familiarized with a new console and how to develop for it. So in that regard, I support remasters. But when you keep on remastering the same game over and over, I don't support that at all. I find that it's just a way to fleece people. I mean, I've bought in many games that are remasters, and I've had some fun times playing remasters, but like in general, I prefer if companies stick to creating new IPs and creating new games in a series. Like, to me, like, there were a lot of good games during the GameCube era and PS3 era, but I don't want to constantly think back to that era. Like, video games nowadays, the graphics are more powerful than ever, and the physics engines are more realistic than ever. Like, games today have such large worlds, and developers have so much more like tools at their disposal to create vast and enormous worlds. So for me, remasters is just rehashing the same idea over and over again, and to be honest, like, I don't enjoy that. I mean, obviously there's a lot of good games on the past eras, but eventually you have to reconcile with the past and move on. Like, that's how I feel. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments section, and I look forward to talking to you in the next video.